The message arrived at 3 a.m., Earth time. Ambassador Elena Vasquez knew something was wrong the instant her screen turned red. For a heartbeat, she simply stared at it. Then the words appeared. Emergency session. Full council attendance required. Immediate. Her coffee suddenly didn't seem important anymore. Outside the viewport of her quarters, Atheris Prime drifted through the darkness between star systems, its vast silver structure glowing softly against the endless sea of stars. Normally, the sight was calming. Tonight, it felt ominous. Elena slowly set her cup down. In 7 years as Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, she had received urgent messages, diplomatic warnings, and even a few military alerts. She had never received a summons like this. Not a full council emergency session. Those were reserved for disasters, wars, extinction-level threats, civilizations on the brink of collapse. A cold feeling settled in her stomach. The message contained no explanation, no details, just a location, a timestamp, and an order that every council representative was to attend, which meant whatever had happened was bad enough that nobody trusted it to a normal transmission. Elena rose from her chair and reached for her diplomatic jacket. Somewhere on the station, alarms were already beginning to sound. And for the first time in a very long time, she found herself wondering whether the emergency involved humanity, or whether humanity was the emergency. In 5 years as Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, she had never seen a full emergency call, not once. She dressed quickly and walked through the long curved hallways of the station. The walls were made of something that looked like glass, but felt like stone, built by a species that had gone extinct long before humans learned to make fire. The station was old, the council was old, everything in the galaxy, it seemed, was old, except for humanity. When she reached the great doors of the Concord Hall, she paused. She could already hear voices inside, not calm diplomatic voices, but the sharp and fearful sounds of people who were afraid. She straightened her jacket, took a breath, and walked in. The Concord Hall was enormous. It was shaped like a bowl with 42 seats arranged in a wide circle, each one designed for a different species. Some seats were filled with water. Some were wrapped in heat coils. One was simply a dark cloud of gas held in place by a containment field. In every seat, a representative sat, or floated, or hung, and every single one of them looked terrified. At the center of the circle stood High Orbiter Zorath, the chairman of the council. He was tall and thin, with a hard shell covering his body like black armor. His species, the Veil, were insectoid, 6 legs, 4 arms, and a face made of sharp angles and tiny golden eyes. He was over 300 years old, and had led the council for most of that time. Elena had never seen him look worried before. Tonight, his golden eyes moved too quickly, and his upper arms were folded tight against his chest. "The session is now open," Zor said. His voice was translated by the station systems into a flat, calm tone, but Elena could hear the clicks underneath, fast and uneven. He activated the central holo display. A map of the galaxy appeared, glowing blue and white. Then 3 star systems near the outer edge turned red, one after another. "The Van Dominion has attacked," Zorath said. 3 sovereign council species, the Alori, the Drew, and the Macaron, have been invaded. The Macaron homeworld has been destroyed completely. Early estimates suggest 4 billion dead. The hall went silent. Elena felt her stomach drop. 4 billion. She had visited the Macaron homeworld once. It had been covered in golden forests that sang when the wind blew through them. Now it was glass and ash. Zorath continued. The Van Dominion was a military empire from the Outer Rim. They had been growing for centuries, conquering smaller species that had no council protection. But now they had crossed the line. They had struck council members directly, and they had done it with terrifying speed. "They sent a message," Zorath said. He played it. The hologram changed, to show a face broad, gray-skinned, with deep-set eyes that glowed faintly orange. Warlord Thyra, commander of the Ven fleets. He spoke slowly, and his translated voice carried the kind of confidence that came from knowing you could destroy anything in front of you. "We will stop," Thyrak said. "We will hold our current positions and advance no further. But you will give us 12 border systems as payment for our restraint. This includes the human colonies of New Havana and Shenzhen 4, and the remaining homeworlds of the Alori and the Drew. You have 1 week to agree. If you do not, we will continue, and we will not stop until we reach Atheris Prime itself." The message ended. The hall erupted. Elena sat still while the chaos unfolded around her. Delegates shouted over each other. Some demanded war. Others demanded immediate compliance. But as the arguments went on, a pattern became clear. Most of the council was leaning toward giving the Ven what they wanted. The Torvan delegate, a heavy-set creature with 6 eyes, spoke first in support of surrender. The Ven fleet outnumbers our combined forces 3-1, he said. If we fight, we lose more than 12 systems. We lose everything. Others followed. The Chennari delegate agreed. The Solween delegate agreed. One by one, the older and more powerful species did the math and came to the same cold conclusion. Sacrifice the few to save the many. And the few they wanted to sacrifice included 2 worlds full of human beings. Elena listened as delegate after delegate spoke about New Havana and Shenzhen 4 as if they were just numbers on a chart. 12 million people on New Havana, 8 million on Shenzhen 4. Children, families, farmers and teachers and doctors, 20 million lives. And the council discussed them the way someone might discuss the price of fuel. The Alori delegate, a small creature with silver fur and wide wet eyes, begged the council to reconsider. Her voice broke as she described what the van had done to the Macaron, the orbital bombardment, the firestorms, the silence that followed. No one responded to her. No one even looked at her. Elena felt something cold settle inside her chest. Not anger exactly, something deeper, something older. High Arbiter Zorath finally turned to her. Ambassador Vasquez, he said, the council would hear Earth's position on the proposed terms. Every eye, every sensor, every golden insectoid gaze in the room turned toward the human woman in the smallest seat. She could feel them waiting for the young species to cry, to beg, to plead for mercy, the way the Alori had just done. Elena stood up slowly. She looked around the room, meeting the gaze of every delegate, one by one. She looked at Zorath. She looked at the empty, still smoking hologram where Thyra's face had been. Then she spoke. Earth needs 48 hours before it responds, she said. Her voice was calm and steady, almost soft. We will address the council then. That was all. No argument, no emotion, no plea. She turned and walked toward the doors. Behind her, the hall was completely silent. No one had expected that. They had expected tears or fury or desperate bargaining. They had not expected a woman who simply asked for time and then left without looking back. High Arbiter Zorath watched her go. His golden eyes were very still. He had lived for 300 years, and in all that time, he had learned one thing about the galaxy. The species that screamed were never the dangerous ones. The dangerous ones were the ones who went quiet. And right now, humanity had gone very, very quiet. Elena's message reached Earth 7 minutes after she left the Concord Hall. It was short, just 2 words and a code. The 2 words were, "It's time." The code was, Blackthorn. Deep beneath the old city of Geneva, in a bunker that did not officially exist, a red light began to flash. It had never flashed before. The people who worked in that bunker had spent their entire careers hoping it never would. Now it was flashing, and every single one of them felt their blood go cold. Within the hour, the President of the United Earth Government was briefed. Within 2 hours, sealed orders were opened in military installations across human space orders that had been written decades ago, updated every year, and never once activated. Within 4 hours, the largest secret in human history began to move. Fleet Admiral Kalen Rohr was sitting on the porch of his house in northern Canada when the call came. He was 63 years old, retired for 5 years, and he had been watching the snow fall on the pine trees across the lake. His face was hard and lined with a scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw, a gift from a border skirmish 20 years ago that had also taken his daughter from him. The phone rang. He looked at the screen. He closed his eyes for a moment. Then he answered. "Admiral Rohr," said the voice on the other end. "Blackthorn is active. A transport is landing at your location in 12 minutes. He didn't ask questions. He went inside, put on his uniform, and was standing on his front porch with a packed bag when the military shuttle broke through the clouds and landed on his frozen lawn. 3 hours later, he was standing inside Fort Achilles. Fort Achilles was hidden in the Oort cloud, the vast shell of ice and rock that surrounded the solar system far beyond the orbit of Pluto. From the outside, it looked like just another frozen rock drifting in the dark. From the inside, it was the most advanced military installation humanity had ever built. A hollowed-out asteroid filled with command centers, weapons labs, training facilities, and docking bays, large enough to hold a city and ships, thousands of ships. Rory stood on the main observation deck and looked out through the reinforced glass at the cavern below. Row after row of warships sat in their docks, dark and silent, their hulls painted the color of deep space. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, dreadnoughts, 4,000 vessels, each one armed with weapons that no other species in the galaxy knew existed. This was the Phalanx. A woman walked up beside him. Dr. Lian Zhao was small, quiet, and wore glasses that she didn't need. She had perfect vision, but she said the glasses helped her think. She was 51 years old and had spent the last 25 of those years building things that could end worlds. "Admiral," she said. "Welcome back, Doctor," he said. "I wish it were under better circumstances." She nodded and handed him a tablet. On it was the full briefing: the Ven invasion, the Council's cowardice, Elena's 48-hour request, and the classified intelligence that Earth's spy networks had been gathering on the Ven for the past 60 years. Roar read it all. Then he looked up. "How long have we known the Ven would do this?" "We predicted it 30 years ago." Jiao said their expansion pattern was obvious. Every 50 years they push further in. The Council talks. The Council surrenders territory. The Van grow. It's a cycle, and no one ever breaks it, until now. Until now. She led him deeper into the station through corridors that hummed with energy and activity. Technicians ran past them. Engineers shouted orders. Pilots suited up in silence, their faces serious and pale. The entire base had come alive in a matter of hours like a sleeping giant that had finally opened its eyes. They reached the weapons lab. Xiao placed her hand on a scanner, and a heavy door slid open. Inside was a room filled with cold blue light, and a single weapon sitting on a raised platform in the center. It was not large, about the size of a man's torso, and it was perfectly smooth without markings or seams. It looked almost peaceful. "Collapse warhead," Jiao said. "Mark 7th. Each one creates a localized gravitational singularity on detonation, a temporary black hole. If you want to think of it simply, it lasts for approximately 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, it pulls in everything within a radius of 200 kilometers and crushes it into nothing." Roar stared at it. "How many do we have?" "Enough," Jiao said quietly. He understood what she meant. Enough to break a fleet. Enough to crack a planet. Enough to end a civilization if the order was given. "The Council has no idea." Roar said it wasn't a question. "No one does. For 130 years, we've shown the galaxy a small defense fleet, just enough to look like we could protect our borders, and not a ship more. We let them think we were weak. We let them think we were children. And behind the curtain, we studied every war this galaxy has fought for the last 10,000 years. Every conflict, every betrayal, every time the Council sold out a smaller species to keep the peace. And we made a decision. A decision made by every government Earth has had since we first reached the stars." She looked at him with calm, steady eyes. "We decided that we would never be the species that gets sacrificed." Roar nodded slowly. He thought about his daughter. He thought about the Macaron. 4 billion people turned to dust because the Council was too afraid to fight. He thought about New Havana, where children were right now going to school, playing in parks, growing up under an alien sun, completely unaware that a room full of alien politicians had just voted to hand them over to monsters. No, not on his watch. He walked to the main command center and stood before the central console. 200 officers looked up at him, waiting. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "Operation Downfall is active. All ships will be combat ready within 36 hours. Navigation has already plotted our jump coordinates. Not to our borders, not to the Ven front lines, but to the heart of Ven space itself. We're not going to defend. We're going to show up on their doorstep and tell them to go home." He paused and looked around the room. "And if they don't go home, we will make sure they never leave home again." The room was silent for a moment, then every officer stood and saluted. On the observation deck, Jiao stood alone and watched through the glass as the first ships began to power up. Their engines glowed blue in the dark cavern, one after another, like stars being born. She placed her hand on the glass and whispered something to herself. Not a prayer exactly, but close. She had built these weapons because she believed they would keep people safe. She had spent 25 years of her life perfecting the science of destruction so that it would never need to be used. That was the idea. That was always the idea. But now the ships were moving, and the warheads were armed, and somewhere far away, An empire of killers was deciding whether or not to call humanity's bluff. The problem, Xiao thought, was that it wasn't a bluff. Back on Ether Prime, Elena sat in her quarters and prepared a single data chip. It was small enough to fit in her palm. It contained enough information to change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. She held it up to the light and turned it slowly between her fingers. 48 hours. The Council had given her 48 hours because they thought she needed time to accept the inevitable. They thought she would come back broken and ready to surrender. They had no idea what was coming. The 48 hours passed slowly for the galaxy, and not slowly enough for anyone on Earth. When Elena Vasquez walked back into the Concord Hall, every seat was filled. Word had spread not just to the 42 Council species, but beyond, to the trade guilds, the science collectives, the independent stations that orbited distant stars, and listened to Council broadcasts the way ancient humans once gathered around fires. The galaxy was watching. The hall was quieter than before. The fear had settled in deeper now, the way cold water sinks to the bottom of a lake. In the 2 days since the emergency session, the van had continued to tighten their grip on the 3 conquered systems. Reports of atrocities had leaked through cities burned, populations forced into labor camps. Entire continents declared Ven territory. The Alori delegate had not stopped crying. The Drun delegate had not spoken at all. And there, projected in the center of the hall, was the hollow link of Warlord Thyra. He had demanded to attend the session. He wanted to watch the Council accept his terms. He sat in a large chair made of something that looked like bone, and his orange eyes glowed with the lazy confidence of a predator watching trapped prey. High Arbiter Zorath opened the session. His voice was formal and controlled, but his forearms were pressed tightly against his sides, a sign in his species of deep discomfort. Ambassador Vasquez, he said, Earth requested 48 hours. That time has passed. The Council will now hear humanity's response to the terms proposed by the VN Dominion. Elena stood. She was wearing a simple dark suit. No medals, no symbols of rank, nothing decorative. She carried only the small data chip in her right hand. She walked to the center of the hall, her footsteps echoing in the silence, and she placed the chip into the central console. The holographic display activated. At first, nothing appeared. Then slowly, data began to fill the air maps, numbers, coordinates, fleet positions, supply routes, communication codes, personnel files, defense grid blueprints. Layer after layer of information unfolded like pages of a book that should never have been opened. It was the VN Dominion. All of it. Every military secret they had. Every fleet, every base, every bunker, every weakness. The hall went completely still. Thyrax's face changed. The lazy confidence cracked just slightly, like the first line in a sheet of ice before it breaks. He leaned forward in his bone chair. "What is this?" he said. Elena did not look at him. She let the data speak for itself. The Council delegates stared at the hologram with wide eyes and open mouths. The level of detail was beyond anything they had ever seen. The Torvon delegate, who commanded one of the largest intelligence networks in the galaxy, whispered to his aide that even he did not have a tenth of this information. High Arbiter Zorath's golden eyes moved across the data. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said slowly. "How did Earth obtain this?" Elena looked at him. "We watched," she said simply. "We have been watching for a very long time." She stepped closer to the hologram and gestured. The data reorganized itself, and a map of Ven space appeared, their homeworld Corvaxis glowing red at the center. "For 130 years, Elena said, this council has treated humanity as the youngest species at the table. We were given a junior seat. We were told to be patient. We were told that the galaxy works in certain ways, and that we were too new to understand." She paused and looked around the room. "You were right that we were new, but you were wrong about what we were doing with our time." She turned to Zorath. "Hi, Arbiter. We studied this galaxy. We studied its wars. We studied its politics. We studied every negotiation, every treaty, every time a powerful empire threatened a weaker one. And the Council chose to sacrifice the weak to save itself. We found a pattern." Her voice was not loud. It was not angry. It was steady and clear, like a river cutting through stone. "The pattern is this. Someone threatens violence. The Council meets. The Council is afraid. The Council gives away someone else's home to make the threat go away. And it works for a while, until the next threat comes. And the next sacrifice is made. And again, century after century. You call it diplomacy. We call it something else. She let the word hang in the air without saying it. Every delegate in the room understood what she meant. Earth will not be part of that pattern, she said. We do not accept the VEN's terms. We will not surrender New Havana. We will not surrender Shenzhen 4. And we will not stand by while the Alori and the Drun are handed over to be destroyed. The Alori delegate looked up, her wet silver eyes wide with shock. Elena continued. From this moment forward, the Alori and the Dru are under Earth's direct protection. Any attack on their worlds will be considered an attack on ours. Dyra laughed. It was a deep rumbling sound that filled the hall. You are a junior species with a small fleet and 24 colony worlds, he said. You cannot protect yourself, let alone others. If you refuse our terms, we will burn your colonies first, and your home world second. Your little blue planet will be nothing but smoke and memory. Elena turned to face his hologram. She looked directly into his glowing orange eyes. She did not blink. She did not raise her voice. She spoke 5 words. We don't negotiate with killers. Then she tapped the console. The holographic display changed. The map of Venice was replaced by a live feed, a real-time visual transmission from deep space. The image showed stars, empty and cold. Then the stars began to disappear, blocked out by shapes moving across them. Dark shapes, thousands of them. Ships. They came out of nowhere, dropping out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Destroyers first, then cruisers, then carriers, then the massive, terrible shapes of dreadnoughts, each one larger than most space stations. They kept coming, wave after wave, filling the screen, filling the space around them, until the stars themselves were hidden behind a wall of metal and weapons. 4,000 warships, the Phalanx, humanity's hidden armada, built in secret over the course of a century, now fully deployed and positioned at the edge of Venice. The hall erupted. Delegates screamed. Some stood up. Some stumbled backward. The Torvon delegate knocked over his water tank. High Arbiter Zorath's golden eyes went wide, wider than Elena had ever seen them, and his upper arms fell open, a gesture of absolute shock in his species. Elena spoke over the chaos. Earth has given the Ven Dominion a counteroffer, full withdrawal from all conquered territories, all 3 systems, 72 hours, unconditional, non-negotiable. She looked at Thyra's hologram. The warlord was no longer laughing. He was no longer smiling. His orange eyes were fixed on the live feed of the fleet that was already within striking range of his home world. If the Dominion does not comply, Elena said, our fleet will not stay at the border. We will advance. We will not stop at your military targets. We will come for Corvaxis itself, and we will end this. She let the silence fill the room. You have 72 hours, warlord. Use them wisely. Thyra stared at her. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. For the first time in his long career of conquest and cruelty, he had nothing to say. The hollow link disconnected. Elena turned back to the council. 42 species looked at her. Their faces, those that had faces, were pale with shock, wide with disbelief, tight with fear. But the fear was no longer directed at the Ven. It was directed at her, at Earth, at the quiet little species that had sat in the smallest seat and smiled politely for 130 years, while building an armada that could break empires. High Arbiter Zorath was the first to speak. His voice was barely above a whisper. How? He said. How did we not know? Elena picked up her data chip, placed it in her pocket, and looked at him with calm, dark eyes. Because you never thought to look, she said. She returned to her seat, the smallest seat in the Concord Hall, and sat down. She folded her hands in her lap. She waited. The galaxy held its breath. On the Vi homeworld of Corvaxis, the mood had changed. The capital city of Dreven was built into the side of a massive black mountain, its towers carved from stone and metal, rising like teeth against a sky that was always gray. The Ven had ruled from this mountain for over 1,000 years. They had sent fleets from its shadow to conquer dozens of species. They had never once been afraid of anything that lived beyond their borders. Until now, Warlord Thyra stood in the war chamber, a vast underground room lit by orange fire globes that hung from the ceiling like burning eyes. Around him sat the 12 members of the Van High Command generals, fleet commanders, intelligence chiefs. These were the most powerful military minds in the Dominion. Beings who had planned the destruction of civilizations over dinner and slept well afterward. None of them were sleeping well tonight. It is a trick, said General Corvus, the oldest member of the command. He was missing one arm, lost in a campaign 40 years ago, and his gray face was twisted with anger. The humans are weak. Everyone knows this. They have a small fleet, a few colonies. They sit in their little corner of the galaxy and do nothing. This so-called armada is an illusion, projected images, sensor tricks, nothing more. Thyra said nothing. He simply activated the display on the central table. It showed the latest report from Venin Intelligence, not projections, not estimates, but confirmed sensor data from 3 separate scout ships that had approached the human fleet from different angles. The fleet was real, 4,000 ships. The energy signatures coming off their weapon systems were unlike anything in the Ven database. Unknown, unclassified, and terrifyingly powerful. Corvus stared at the data, his remaining hand curled into a fist, then slowly uncurled. "That is not possible," he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "It is not possible, according to what we believed," Thyra said, and what we believed was wrong. He pulled up another file, the intelligence dossier that the human ambassador had displayed before the council. Their own military positions, their own supply lines, their own defense codes, all laid out with perfect accuracy. The humans had been watching the Ven for decades, perhaps longer, and the Ven had never once detected them. "They know everything about us," Thyra said, "and we know nothing about them. We did not even know this fleet existed." The room was quiet. Fire globes crackled above them. Fleet Commander Zella, the youngest member of the High Command and the most decorated, spoke next. She was calm, where Corvus was angry, and her voice was low and careful. "The humans have positioned their fleet within strike range of Corvoxus," she said. "Not our front lines, not our military bases, our home world. That is not a defensive move. It is a threat of total destruction. They would not dare," Corvus said. "They already dared," Zella replied. "They moved 4,000 ships across half the galaxy without anyone noticing, and they aimed them at the one target that matters most to us. This is not a species that bluffs." Thyrak raised a hand and the room fell silent. "Before we decide anything," he said, "there is one more piece of information you need to see." He played the recording of a border encounter that had happened 12 hours ago. 3 Vin cruisers, heavy warships, each one capable of leveling a city, had encountered a small patrol group of human ships near the edge of the contested zone. The Vin captains, acting on standing orders to engage any unauthorized vessels, had opened fire. The engagement lasted 9 seconds. The recording showed it clearly. The human ships moved with a speed and precision that should not have been possible for vessels of their size. They did not dodge the Vian weapons fire. They simply were not where the fire arrived. And when they returned fire, the result was immediate and total. 3 VN cruisers gone. Not damaged, not disabled, gone, as if they had never existed. The sensors showed a brief gravitational distortion at the point of each ship's destruction. A signature that the Ven Science Division could not explain. The recording ended. The war chamber was silent. General Corvus sat down slowly. He did not speak again. Far away on the bridge of the UES Thermopylae, Fleet Admiral Kalen Rohr stood with his hands clasped behind his back and watched the stars through the forward viewport. The Thermopylae was the flagship of the Phalanx, a dreadnought 3 kilometers long, carrying enough firepower to crack a moon around it. The rest of the fleet held formation in perfect silence, their running lights dimmed, their weapons hot, waiting. Rohr had not slept in 36 hours. He did not feel tired. He felt the way he always felt before a potential engagement, sharp, focused, and deeply aware of the weight on his shoulders. Every ship in this fleet, every crew member, every weapon, they were all his responsibility, and so were the 20 million civilians on New Havana and Shenzhen 4th, the surviving populations of the Alori and Drew homeworlds. And if things went badly, the 8 billion people on Earth itself. His executive officer, Captain Mara Singh, approached him with a status report. "All ships report combat ready. Admiral, the fleet is holding position. 59 hours remaining on the deadline. Any movement from the Van? Their main fleet is still positioned around the 3 conquered systems. No advance toward us. No retreat either. They're sitting still. They're thinking," Rohr said. "Yes, sir." He turned from the viewport and walked to his private office, a small room behind the bridge with a desk, a chair, and very little else. On the desk was a photograph in a simple frame. It showed a young woman with dark hair and her father's eyes, laughing at something outside the frame. Lieutenant Sarah Rohr. She had been 24 when she died, killed in a border skirmish with pirates that the council had classified as a minor incident in a non-priority zone. The official report had called her death an acceptable loss. Roar had never accepted it. He sat down and looked at the photograph for a long time. Then his console beeped. An incoming message from Fort Achilles. He opened it. Dr. Xiao's face appeared on screen. Tired, but steady. "Admiral," she said, "all collapse warheads are armed and synchronized with the fleet targeting systems. If you give the order, they can deploy within 4 minutes." "Understood." There was a pause. Xiao took off her unnecessary glasses and rubbed her eyes. "Kalen," she said, dropping the formality. They had known each other for 20 years. "Do you think it will come to using them?" He looked at the photograph on his desk. He thought about 4 billion Macaron who had died because no one was willing to fight for them. He thought about the Allery delegate crying in the conquered hall while the galaxy looked away. He thought about every species that had ever been sacrificed on the altar of someone else's peace. "I hope not," he said. "But hope isn't a strategy." Zhao nodded. She understood. She had built these weapons for exactly this reason. Not to use them, but to make sure the people who would use them against others had a reason to stop. Deterrence, the oldest game in human history. The game that only worked if the other side believed you would follow through. Lean Roar said, "Yes, if they call our bluff, if they push, and I have to give the order, how many will die on Corvoxus?" She put her glasses back on. Her face was very still. "The entire planet." She said 11 billion. The number hung between them like a stone in the air. "I need you to know something," Roar said. "If I give that order, it won't be out of anger. It won't be revenge. It will be because they gave us no other choice. And because if we back down now, the next species that sits in that junior seat on the council will be the one that gets sacrificed." "I know," Zhao said softly. "That's why they chose you." The call ended. Roar sat alone in the quiet room. Outside, 4,000 ships waited in the dark, armed with weapons that could end worlds. Inside, one man carried the weight of a decision that no one should ever have to make. 59 hours. The clock was ticking, and on the other side of the galaxy, in a war chamber, carved into a black mountain, the most feared military empire in the known universe was doing something it had never done before. It was afraid. 6 hours remained on the deadline when the message came. Elena was standing in her quarters on a Theos Prime, staring out the window at the endless black of space when her console lit up. It was not a council transmission. It was not routed through the diplomatic channels. It came directly to her on a frequency that only Earth's communication systems could decode. The Ven had figured out how to reach her personally. That alone told her something important. They had been paying attention. She opened the transmission. Warlord Thyra's face appeared on the screen. He looked different. The arrogance was gone. The lazy glow in his orange eyes had dimmed to something quieter, something Elena had never expected to see on a Vi face. He looked tired for a long moment. Neither of them spoke. Then Thyra leaned forward in his bone chair and said in a voice stripped of all pretense, "All theater, all the performance of power. The Dominion accepts your terms." Elena felt her heart beat once hard in her chest. She kept her face still. "Full withdrawal," she said. "All 3 systems. All 3 systems. Our fleets will begin pulling back within the hour. The Allori and Drew homeworlds will be cleared within 48 hours. Your colonies will not be touched. Unconditional." Thyrax's jaw tightened. This word cost him more than anything. For a species that had built its entire civilization on dominance, on never bending, on taking whatever they wanted, because no one could stop them. The word unconditional was like swallowing poison. "Unconditional," he said. Elena nodded once. "Earth acknowledges the Dominion's compliance. Our fleet will hold its position until the withdrawal is confirmed. If any Ven vessel deviates from the retreat, the agreement is void." Thyrax stared at her for a long time. Then he asked a question that she did not expect. "Why?" he said. "You could have demanded territory. You could have demanded reparations. Your fleet is at our doorstep. You could have demanded anything, and we would have had no choice but to give it. Why did you ask for nothing?" Elena looked at him through the screen. She thought about what to say. She could have given him a political answer, something about strategy, about long-term stability, about the balance of power, but she didn't. She told him the truth, because that's what makes this real. She said, "If we took your territory, we would just be the next empire, the next Ven, the next species that takes from the weak because it can. We didn't build that fleet to conquer. We built it to make sure no one else has to die because the galaxy was too afraid to say no." Thyrax said nothing for several seconds. Then he did something that Elena would remember for the rest of her life. He lowered his head, not much, just slightly, just enough, among the VIN. It was the closest thing to a gesture of respect. The transmission ended on the bridge of the Thermopylae. The message reached Admiral Rohr 3 minutes later. Captain Singh delivered it personally, and her voice cracked slightly as she spoke. Admiral, the VI have accepted full withdrawal. Unconditional. Rohr stood very still around him. The bridge crew held their breath. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, the weight of weeks of preparation, of sleepless nights, of a decision that had hung over his head like a blade. Then he exhaled slowly, deeply, a breath he felt like he had been holding for years. "Stand down, weapons," he said. "All ships, maintain position. We watch until the withdrawal is confirmed, then we go home." The bridge erupted, not in cheers. This crew was too disciplined for that, but in something quieter. Relief. Shoulders dropping, hands unclenching. A few officers wiped their eyes and turned away so no one would see. Captain Singh gripped the railing in front of her and let out a breath of her own. It was over. On Aetheris Prime, the Galactic Council convened for what would become the most important session in its history. The Ven withdrawal was confirmed within hours. Their massive warships, the same ships that had burned the Makaran homeworld and terrorized 3 civilizations, turned around and headed back to their own space. On the Alori homeworld, the first people emerged from underground shelters where they had been hiding for weeks. They looked up at the sky and saw for the first time in a long time, nothing. No V ships, no orbital weapons, no burning cities, just clouds and pale sunlight. An Ari child, small and silver-furred, pulled on her mother's hand and pointed up. "Are they gone?" she asked. "Yes," her mother whispered. "They're gone." Who made them go? Her mother did not have a word in her own language for the species that had saved them. She used the human word instead. "Humans," she said. The child looked up at the sky and repeated the word softly, as if learning it for the first time. In the Concord Hall, High Arbiter Zorath addressed the full council. His voice was careful and measured, but there was something underneath it that had not been there before: humility. "The crisis is resolved," he said. "The Ven Dominion has withdrawn. The conquered systems are being liberated. This outcome was achieved entirely through the actions of Earth and its representatives." He turned to Elena. "Ambassador Vasquez, the Council wishes to know, what does Earth want in return for its intervention? Territory, expanded representation, trade concessions? Name your price, and the Council will honor it." Elena stood. She looked around the room at the 42 species that had just days ago been ready to trade her people away like cargo. She felt no anger toward them. She understood fear. She understood the instinct to survive at any cost. But she also understood that survival without principle was just another word for slow death. "Earth wants one thing," she said. "A new law, a permanent binding resolution that no member species of this council will ever again be offered as a bargaining chip to an aggressor. No homeworld will be surrendered. No population will be traded. No civilization will be sacrificed so that others can avoid a fight." She paused. If this council is going to mean something, if it is going to be more than a place where the powerful negotiate away the lives of the weak, then it needs to stand for something that cannot be negotiated. The hall was silent. Zorath looked at her for a long time, his golden eyes unreadable. Then he turned to the council. "The motion is on the floor," he said. "All in favor." Every seat in the chamber lit up green. Every single one, even the species that had argued loudest for surrender, even the Torvan, even the Canary, they all voted yes. Some of them, Elena suspected, voted out of genuine conviction. Others voted because they had just watched a junior species deploy a secret armada and stare down the most feared empire in the galaxy without blinking, and they were smart enough to know which way the wind was blowing. Either way, the resolution passed unanimously. In the days that followed, the galaxy changed. Not all at once. Galaxies are large, and change moves slowly through them, like light through deep water. But it changed. 14 species formally requested alliance treaties with Earth. The Alori ambassador, her silver fur still matted from weeks of hiding, came to Elena's quarters and said nothing. She simply took Elena's hand in both of hers and held it. That was enough. The Van Dominion retreated behind its borders and went quiet. Intelligence reports suggested that Thyra had begun reforms within the Dominion, though whether out of genuine change or simple fear was impossible to say. It didn't matter. What mattered was that the killing had stopped. On Aetheris Prime, Workers installed a new seat in the Concord Hall. It was larger than Elena's old one. It was placed in the inner ring among the senior species. No one objected, and far away, in the cold silence between stars, the phalanx began its long journey home. 4,000 ships moved through the dark in perfect formation, their weapons cold, their engines humming softly. They had crossed half a galaxy, prepared to fight a war that would have killed billions. They were going home, without firing a single shot in anger. On the bridge of the Thermopylae, Admiral Rohr stood alone at the viewport. The stars moved slowly past white, blue, gold. His console beeped. A message from Dr. Xiao at Fort Achilles. It was short, just one line. We didn't have to use them. He read it twice. Then he picked up the photograph from his desk. His daughter laughing. Forever young, forever gone. He held it against his chest for a moment. That was always the point, he said quietly. He set the photograph down, straightened his uniform, and walked back to the bridge. There was a fleet to bring home. There were crews who hadn't seen their families in weeks. There were colonies full of people who would never know how close they had come to annihilation, and that was fine. That was exactly how it should be. The whole point of carrying the weight was so that others didn't have to. The Thermopylae sailed on through the dark, leading its fleet toward a small blue world orbiting an ordinary star. Behind them, the galaxy whispered. On trading posts and space stations, in the halls of alien governments and the classrooms of alien children, in the deep places where old species kept their histories and their fears, a new story was being told. It was the story of a young species that had been underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed. A species that had sat quietly in the smallest seat and watched and waited and built something in the dark. A species that, when the moment came, did not ask for power or revenge or glory. It asked only that the galaxy be better than it was. And when they spoke of Earth, they spoke of it differently now. Not with pity, not with dismissal, not even with fear, though the fear was there, buried deep. They spoke of it the way you speak of a storm that could have destroyed everything, but chose instead to clear the sky. They spoke of it with respect, and somewhere on a dozen liberated worlds, children looked up at unfamiliar stars and asked who had saved them. The answer moved through the galaxy like a wave, quiet and unstoppable, carrying with it a truth that the universe would not soon forget. The humans came not for conquest, not for profit, not for power. They came because it was right, and they would come